Hi guys, welcome to the next edition of Black Yarning. Tonight I've got a really great friend of mine coming in to join us, Karan Kent. Hi Karan.
Hey, how you going?
Good. I'm so glad that you could come in, and it was a little while to get you on, but I'm so glad that we've been able to.
I know. Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to this conversation. Let's see where it goes.
All right, that's cool. So before we do start, how about you give our listeners a little bit about who you are and where you're from?
Okay, so as you said, my name's Karan Kent, and I'm down Frankston Way, so in the southeast suburbs. I have been in community for quite some time. A proud Bidjara woman. So mum's part of the Stolen Gen. She's from up Charleville Way, which is out Queensland way. So pretty much if you get from Brisbane, you take about a 9-10 hour trip straight across towards Northern Territory. That's Charleville, Augathella, in that general area there. So born and raised in Melbourne. So I was born on Wurundjeri country, little place called Warrandyte, and lived there until I was 14, left there, came across to Bunurong land. Been here ever since. I raised my kids here. So I have 3 adult children. I have 16 grandchildren, and I have 4 great-grandchildren. So I sit on Koori Court, elder respected person. So I've only just started that, and absolutely loving it. I mean, that's an absolute privilege to be part of that whole system. I sit on the LAECG. So I've been part of the LAECG down this way for a while. So I'm co-chairing that. I also been sitting on Delpjar down this way again, chairing that for the past 4 years. And I've recently, or just about to step to the side of that, simply because I'm a sole trader. So I started my business, Yimba Yumba, back in 2019, late 2019. Just started building the business, which was fantastic, and it was going great guns. And then that funny thing where everything got locked up happened. So we're back. Yeah, I don't know whether people might be able to remember that, it's a strange thing. It happened over a period of time. So it kind of like, went up and down, but now it's just going great guns. So now what I do with my business is I'm blessed to have a diploma in Wayapa Wuurrk. So I did Wayapa Wuurrk back in 2017, and I don't know, Uncle Jamie Thomas started that with his partner, Sarah Jones. So that is the umbrella organisation. So I go into kinders, schools, corporates, wherever, and give the gift of Wayapa. So Wayapa is all about the earth mindfulness. It's about reconnecting and touching the earth, and we all know, go out bush, put your feet on the ground, whether it's in the backyard or, wherever, and it makes such a difference with us. It just makes us feel really good. So, it's about looking at the earth first and foremost, and what our part is on the earth, and then let's look after the mind, body, spirit. So so I do lots of stuff in kindies, done a lot of stuff in kindies, because with Wayapa we've just started the Wayapa in Education. So that started at the beginning of last year, and again that's just exploding everything. So most of my work, particularly over the last 10 months, has been in the early years sector, and at the end of the year, you get crazy when you've got your own business because you're doing it all. And at the end of the year, somebody said to me, how many people have you impacted, blah, blah, blah. So I did a quick sketch of the work I've been doing. And I'd been, in probably a 6-month period, I'd been into over, 25 kindergartens, I believe it was. That's impacted about 4,500, 5,000 little ones. So you've got to be real mindful what's coming out of your mouth and what you're sharing with the little ones, so you actually have a lasting impact and message to them. So, that was pretty incredible when I started putting it in those terms. So, what else can I tell you, AJ?
That's cool. I'll ask you a question.
Ask me a question, because you know me, I love to talk. Give me a microphone.
I know.
I'm real shy, just like you, mate.
Yeah. This is going to be like a 4-part series. You have to come back. Join us next week for Karan with part 2. Question I've got is what's the name of your business? What's it named after? And why did you want to become a sole trader?
You know what? It's interesting. how much time have we got? You know what? No, seriously, I'm in my mid-60s, so I thought that about 5 years ago, back in, I think it was around 2017, like this is serious, about 2017, I did the second Wayapa diploma course. And what had happened was when I was a KMS worker, career maternity program worker, back in 2014, 2015, all the KMS workers across the state came together and we were down in Phillip Island. And this young fella came along and he did this thing. And I've done yoga and I've done Tai Chi and I've done all those sorts of complementary, therapies, but there's always been something missing in it. And so this young fella came along and he did this thing with us, and there was a little bit of gentle movement in it. There was some mindfulness. There was a little bit of visualization, what have you. And it just touched me at such a deep, deep soul level that it haunted me. He came and went, I moved on. I went to other businesses, what have you. And so in 2017, I actually did the diploma. It was going to be personally for myself for no other reason, just as a personal thing. And then as I was doing the course or the thing, it was, you can do your own business. You can run your own business. And I'd never, ever considered doing my own business because I always worked in local government, in Aboriginal Health, whatever, in organisations where you've got all that backup, all that support, and you're just one of, everybody else going in the same direction. And so in 2018, my husband got really ill and he was taken to hospital in an ambulance. And I absolutely, it frightened me because he was really crook. And so I walked away. At the time I was in local government. I was on a good income, had a great job. And you know what? Health's more important than any of that. So I just walked away and I thought, you know what? I can just retire and I can look after hubby and, go hand in hand, skipping down into the sunset. Well, when you go from being employed full-time on a good wage to going and knocking on the door of Centrelink, there's kind of like a slight imbalance. So then I decided that I had this diploma, get your backside into gear and actually put yourself out there and create a business. And I don't need to make $1 million. That's not what I'm about. It's about actually healing myself, but in healing myself, healing others. So, stopping and not being in all this chaos and all this grey noise and craziness. Let's just stop and breathe, stop and smell the roses, appreciate what we've got. And I think, like hubby was okay and he's been, he's got a lung disease. So we have our good days, our bad days, what have you. But being a sole trader, I can actually work my own hours. I'm not accountable to anybody else other than myself. And so that's where that came from. As far as the business is concerned, it's called Yimba Yumba. So it's Bidjara, it's 2 Bidjara words. And, as you know, we don't have a word for, that means one thing. Yeah. So it means home learning. So the Yumba, it means home, here and now, this time, this place. And then Yimba is to listen, to hear, to learn, and to understand and seek knowledge. So it's home learning. So it's learning from the planet. And that's what it's all about. My tag is in sync with nature. So Yimba Yumba it ties it in beautifully for me. So that's where the name came from. That's kind of like a little snapshot of the background of why I'm doing my business. So, yeah. And look, I played with the business for a while because, like in your mid-60s, you're wanting to give it up. But I get so passionate about going and playing with the little ones, but also talking to corporate community, whoever, and just, take your shoes off, put your feet in the ground. Let's just stop and breathe for a minute, and in some of the sessions that I've held, I held a session with some young people and they were like, a couple of them were bawling their eyes out because they said they'd never stopped. They'd heard the grey noise and they'd never actually stopped and listened to nothing. So they didn't know what nothing sounded like until they actually stopped. And for me, that gives me so much joy, in taking it further and sharing. So did I answer your question or have gone round and round and round?
No. That's good. That's good. Where did you start your career? We're going back a few years.
Back in the olden days. back in the day. Now it's a long time ago. It was back in the 70s, mate. You know.
Yeah.
No, seriously. Look, I was a bit of a. I know this is really difficult to even comprehend, but I was a little bit of a rebel back in the day. You know, I turned into those teenage years and stuff happened, and you know, I left home at 15. I was living in a flat with my sister in Greville Street in Paran, you know, and that was back in the early 70s. So that was about 74. I started working for GJ Coles in Swanston Street. So it was Coles number 6. It's no longer there. They've just ripped it to pieces. So it was the one that turned into McDonald's, and then now McDonald's has turned into the station. So I started at Coles, and I used to travel from Warrandyte to the city, and that would take about an hour 40 on the bus. And then, like I say, turned 15, left home. So I started in retail, you know, and in the day, GJ Coles was kind of like you stood in the middle of the counter and you had the items in front of you and all around you, and you'd walk up and down the centre of the counter and sell the items. And you know, it was fabulous. So that's where I started. From there, I went to another store, which was Walton's in Chapel Street in Paran. Walton's are no longer.
I remember Walton's.
You remember Walton's, do you? Walton's. Oh, my. And then at the time.
Got together with Norman Ross. I remember Norman Ross and Walton's, we're going to get you. We're getting you, getting better. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know the one. Ooh. And so there, by this stage, I was married at 18 and I was pregnant, still working, and I had no issue with that. And I was actually asked when I was about 6 months pregnant, so I had a bit of a belly, and I was actually asked to leave because it wasn't very fitting for the public to see the belly. Yeah. So I left, and I mean, you know, women would be outraged now to even, like, we wouldn't even ask that. We wouldn't even consider that. But in the day, in the 70s, so that was 78. So I left work, stayed home, had kids for a couple of years, but I always worked. Like, I worked in, you know, bars and stuff, and did, you know, clean toilets, done housekeeping, you name it. And then by the time I turned into my 30s, 30 was really old. And I got lost because I was a wife, I was a mum, I was the kid's mother, or, you know, Bill's missus. So I was all these other things, and I didn't know who I actually was. And in doing that, I found a lump in my breast. So I had to have that removed. It wasn't cancer, but it scared the living daylights out of me because it was a process that happened where I had 3 little kids, and I seriously thought, like you look at life differently. It gives you a shake. So I decided that I needed to go back to education, because otherwise I'm going to be on these $9.50 jobs forever. Yeah. So I went and did a diploma in I did an associate diploma in community development in the day, completed that in 96. So I completed the last original community development course. Then it morphed into social work, and then now I think you're lucky if you get, you know, one subject of community development. So I did that, and then from there, you know, I worked in needle exchanges. I worked a lot in or not a lot, I worked in domestic violence stuff. I worked in neighbourhood houses. Like I say, you know, I've got over 15 years in local government, so I've worked in 3 different local government areas, and worked in hospitals, so in Aboriginal Health. So held, you know, senior positions in that, you know, and yeah, so a mix of everything. So there's not a whole lot that I haven't done, you know, but very much people person, and very much in that care role, and coming from the point of where people are up to and working with community at that level, whatever that level is. And I had this conversation with a girlfriend today over lunch, and I was saying to her, in one community I worked in, people were saying that transport was a real issue, like getting the bus, because they had 2 buses a day to get them from Cooey Rup into Pakenham. And then I moved over into this local government area, and a local community, Langwarrin, had issues with transport. Their transport was they had to wait 30 minutes for a bus. So it's about looking at, it was real for them. And so it's looking at where people are from and where we are in our stages and what's real to us and working from that point forward. So, yeah.
Now, growing up, did you have any role models, or do you still have role models at the moment?
Yeah, I have a number of role models. When I was a kid, we had a really upside down kind of like, certainly we had a dysfunctional home life. I could tell you some stories, but I don't know whether to get into them.
They can be part 2 and part 3 of the work series.
So I was raised with mum who was stolen gen, so she never spoke about that. She was a stay-at-home mum. Dad was an ex-serviceman, and had his own viewpoints. So mum wasn't allowed to work. So where was I going with that? So that was really interesting. And then, mum's 3 brothers, or 2 of those brothers, Uncle Stan and Uncle Ted were really influential in my life because they were shearers. So they'd go out bush and then they'd come and stay with us for, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks, whatever time frame that was. And they had a lot to do with us because they didn't have kids themselves. So we were kind of like the little nieces, and, they'd literally pick us up and throw us to each other. So we would go highballing it through the air, and the other one would catch us, and then you'd have mum would be screaming, don't drop it, and all this kind of stuff. They were my role models because they were really strong. And Auntie Ivy's mum's eldest sister, God bless them, none of them are here at the moment. But, even mum as a role model too. And I suppose part of that is because what she went through and what she endured as a kid. And then I kind of like looked at her life and went, she was born into an institution. She got married as an institution. And, then her last month of life was in a nursing home, and it was in an institution, and the courage and strength that she had just blows me away. Like that was a real role model. I didn't know at the time because she was just mum. Now that she's passed, and she's been passed for a number of years, and in reflection and myself as an adult, you can look back and go, yeah, Auntie Ivy was always a role model. She was 10 years older than mum. She was a nun. So when she came out of the home, she actually was never going to have children because of their backstory. And so she went into the nunnery, and she was a nun. And we went to Sydney at one stage, and we were in the rocks because she liked to show us around. And she went and she pinched these bloody shells and gave us these little shells that were for sale and popped them in our pocket. And I was mortified that a nun would do that. Like, it was outrageous. Yeah. So Auntie Ivy was always a role model because, again, she was in the nunnery. She met her husband. She had to write to the Pope to get out of that and then, live her life. But there was always kindness in everybody. She would take, like, the whole family, like mum and dad would do the same. We would take strangers in all the time. We'd have somebody laying on the floor sleeping that we just picked up from wherever because I had nowhere to, So those types of things are role models for me because you look at that and that all that is part of who I am, has created who I am. Yeah. Externally, I don't know. I suppose it was more immediate family were the role modeling.
Yeah.
Opposed to looking out there too far. Yeah. Now I look at people in community.
Yeah.
And there's a number of people in community that I consider role models. Like I ever watch you. You do role modeling for me, because I watch the work that you've done. And this isn't sucking eggs. It's true, I watch the work that you've done. And that to me is like, that blows me away. Because you're changing lives, you're changing perceptions, so it's that kind of stuff. Auntie Helen Bernad's here in Frankston Way, she big role model for me because, again, she's an elder in community and she comes at a gentle pace and she embraces people and she'll tell you when you're right, wrong or indifferent in such a way that you take it, you hear what she has to say, you know. So there's a whole range of people along the way that have done that, have been those role models. Yeah. But yeah.
What do you, at the political climate at the moment, where do you think Indigenous affairs could be or should be?
Oh, shoot me now. I think the voice has to come in. You know, we need to have a seat at the table. Yeah. And until we have a seat at the table, change isn't going to happen. I look at over the last 10 years probably, and probably it comes from, you know, Rudd's speech, his sorry speech. So from that, so many things have started taking off. And over the last 5-10 years, you can actually see that, you know, our voice is actually starting to get heard. You know, Aboriginality is at the front of policy making and stuff. You know, we've got, a dozen, you know, Aboriginal people in Parliament now, you know, so it's changing. It's just sometimes taking slower, but at the same time, if you kind of like look at the timeline from all those who we're standing on their shoulders, how long it's been, you know, they were doing the same fight way back when, you know, they've created a path for us to come forward. So, you know, hopefully, you know, but then in saying that, you know, having a voice in Parliament, what does it mean? What does it look like? Same as treaty here. You know, I really support treaty, but it's the concept and the idea. But then what does it mean? What's it going to look like? It's all those intangibles that we don't know. So do we trust that we put it forward and it's a step forward opposed to a step back, you know, or opposed to just sitting still, you know? For me, it's a step forward, you know, and yes, there's all those grey areas about what does it look like, who's going to be in, what it's going to look like, how's it going to benefit, is it really going to make a difference, you know? So I think it's a really beautiful time in history because we can completely muck this up or we can completely fly with it. Yeah. And we haven't had that opportunity. We haven't had that opportunity on the same level before.
Yeah.
So to me, I get excited about that. I think, you know, all the planets are starting to align. You know, let's see where we go. You know, do we jump off the cliff and fly or do we jump off the cliff and fall flat on our face? And I'm an optimistic person, so I like to think we're going to fly, you know. I don't think it's going to solve everything. We've still got a long, long way to go, but it's a starting point. It's moving forward.
Yeah. When you first started getting into Aboriginal affairs, what were the kind of issues that were happening at the time, and are those issues still prominent now, or do you think that we are still kind of working around all the issues and we haven't really progressed at all?
That's a tricky one because we were talking about self-determination, we were talking about treaty, we were talking about land rights, we were talking about very similar things, just different wrappings now.
Yeah.
You know, so I worry sometimes, have we actually progressed a long way, or are we just changing the wrapping on it and calling it something different, or, you know, making it a little bit prettier to fit into 2023 opposed to fitting into 1973.
Yeah.
You know, I can remember all the marches and a whole lot of stuff happening in the early 70s, you know, but how far have we come? You know, I wonder sometimes. The optimist in me thinks, oh gosh, we're coming a long way. This is fantastic. But then I kind of like sometimes stop and go, have we?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you go into early childhood services,
yep,
quite a lot now. How well are they trying to embed Indigenous perspectives into curriculum?
Fantastic, really not so good, and absolutely poor. They're really craving to know and to understand and to do, but a number of the services are paralysed because we're so bloody politically correct that they're too scared to do anything because they might get into trouble.
Yeah.
And I keep saying my perspective on it is if you come from good intent, then move forward, you know. I was in a kindy the other day and they're really coming a long way. They're doing really good. And I've been in the kinder for 3 years now, going on a monthly basis across 12 months. So, and now they've got their little corner and they've got their cultural corner and it's got the Aboriginal flag and it's got all bits and pieces and what have you, which is just lovely. And I'm looking at it and I'm doing a session and I'm looking across on the far wall at the cultural corner and our flag's upside down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't stand it. I couldn't, and I'm sitting there and I'm trying to go forward. So what I did was actually at the end, we all got up and we all went to the cultural corner because I wanted them to show me the cultural corner. I wanted them to tell me what's the meaning of the colours on the flag. And then I said to them, you know, like about turning it over the other way because, you know, as Aboriginal people, we actually stand on the land. We're not buried.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was, and I did it in a gentle way. The educators were absolutely mortified and the little ones kind of like took it on board and, you know, so it kind of like created that little bit of education that, you know, this is the way. Spoke to the centre manager who nearly like melted in front of me. But, you know, they're trying to put their rap together at the moment. They're trying really, really hard to do bits and pieces. And like I said to her, come with good intent and let's work it out together. You know, they don't need to know everything. You know, and again, sending them back to the local land councils. You know, go back to your local rep, have a talk with your local rep, get that relationship coming in, you know. And even that in itself, we need to have a bit of a change occurring there where it can be more of an open door, you know, so those first conversations can happen. So, yeah.
Do you find it hard? Because I think what's happening around the place a little bit is some of the lands councils are actually going, we're just so busy on doing our
cultural heritage
stuff.
Yep.
We don't have time to sit down and help organisations with their RAPs per se. Or I know Reconciliation Australia and action plans go and talk to elders.
Yeah.
Some of our elders are really tired and they go, we don't have time to do this and we're not paid to do this.
Yep.
What would you recommend to early childhood or any organisation that's going, well, we're trying to contact Aboriginal people, but they're not responding back to us?
Look, it's a really tricky one because that I hear that more often than not. You know, because respectfully, that's the first point of contact. But then at the same time, I totally get that our reps are so flat out because they have got all their stuff to do. They also need to consider that, you know, having some space and time there to have conversations. Again, it's looking at, have you got any children in your centre, you know, that Aboriginal children in your centre? Have you spoken to their parents? You know, have you brought the families in? You know, all that kind of stuff as starting points. I'm really lucky because I've got really strong connections and networks. So there's a few people within that network that I can call on and get them to come into the kindy and sit down and have those conversations. So it's really reliant on your own, you know, your own knowings and your own network, the way I work it, you know, because there are obstacles with RAPs, you know, so, yeah.
I know you do corporate work as well.
I do corporate work as well, yes.
You do corporate work. What's the difference between presenting something to community compared to presenting something to corporate?
Oh, that's very interesting. Very different, let me say. And like I said, I've been doing a lot of work with the kindies, so I haven't been doing a whole lot of growing up work. So with the kindies, I can get down and we can laugh and play and, you know, touchy-feely, all that kind of, you know, all the little items and bits and pieces, what have you. And we can be silly because we can be birds, you know, or we can be trees and kangaroos and stuff. And one particular government department I had them in suits in a park in Frankston. And with Wayapa, there's 14 elements. And within the elements, there's a kangaroo. And kangaroo teaches us self-care, look after yourself, like stop for a minute and let's just take care of ourselves. And so with that particular government department, we were being kangaroos. With bird, air element, it's about sometimes we need to look at things from a different perspective. And then we have eel, and eel's about sometimes we have to dig deep to find things, but it's also our connections with ancestors. So I said to the staff, when things are getting on top of you, just stop and be a kangaroo for a minute. Go be a bird, just start flying, or be the eel. And probably a week or 2 weeks later, the manager rang me and she said, oh, for goodness sake, Karen, what have you done? She said, I've got bloody birds flying all around the office. She said, and I've got kangaroos jumping in the staff room, and then I've got bloody eels down below, like just, So, I don't, obviously I change my speak a little bit, but I don't change too much. Like obviously I'm not, as wool and jumpy around as I am with corporates. But from that also, recently, like since the beginning of the year, I actually did a session with some educators, and it was the whole school. So there was about 50 educators. And I went in thinking that I was going to be going to maybe, half a dozen educators. Next minute, there's, 50 educators and they're all grown ups. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my gosh. So I changed it slightly. I don't change it a lot because you know what? This is me, and I'm quite comfortable in myself and how I share it. But there is a level of, just kicking in a gear. Been into Crown and worked with the staff at Crown, and there I noticed that, you change things slightly because you have to talk on a slightly different level, because it is corporate. But I try and keep it similar and with a bit of playfulness in it, so yeah.
Now, I've attended your Wayapa with the Brighton boys.
Oh yes, the Brighton boys. They were beautiful.
Yeah, who absolutely loved the Wayapa. Initially, they were giggling a little bit through the first part.
Yeah.
But then by the time we did it the second time and the third time around, you could actually see them being connected to your voice in helping them direct where their thoughts and feelings were actually going. And you could see that become such involved within it.
Because you go to a place, and with those young fellas, even in their movement, you could see traditional dance coming out. Yeah. In the movements and the steps they were doing. So there's a lot of connection between the gentleness of the movements, and each of those movements, I blinked then. Each of those movements are really nice and gentle, but it has got that really relaxing traditional dance movement in it. So yeah.
And so I would just want to say I would recommend you to anybody to go in and do it.
To anybody, just anybody. Recommend me to everybody.
Everybody who's listening to this, you have to actually go, and all Karen's details will be on the bottom of the YouTube channel. So you actually be able to contact Karen direct.
Please do, yeah, absolutely. So I go to the participant. So if you want it in, if you've got a school, we can do it inside, we can do it outside. I've been to, from kindies right through to age services. You can do Wayapa sitting, you can do Wayapa standing. It's very gentle, it's easy. But it's really, really great.
Yeah. A question. What have you? I know that you used to work at a gathering place before. Yep. What made you move from the government space into community?
I've always worked in community.
Oh, okay.
I've always, part of my role because it's community development, I've always worked beside community, and I really love it. with the gathering place, because I'm a one of the founding members of Jambana, or Nirrimah Jambana, in Frankston Gathering Place. So I got together back in when I was working in local government. There was just after Rudd's talk, there were a number of elders in our community that were wanting a gathering place. They were talking about it, but it was about, there wasn't the funding. It was kind of like this, from a non-Aboriginal perspective, it was something new and something different. So local government couldn't get their head around it. And then Rudd did his speech, then the Close the Gap game came, and then money started coming out around 2010. And so it was at that time that council actually started looking for a parcel of land and also a building to go on it. So in those early days, it started with a handful of elders sitting around a coffee table in somebody's home. That moved forward slightly. I came on board, a number of other people came on board, and then from that point we just kept moving with it until launching it in 2017. And something I'm really super proud of, because the gathering place, it's about for the gathering place, it's about all our mob coming and being together and just having a safe space to be able to talk, a safe space to reawaken culture, all those sorts of things. But it's also about the allies coming in and having the ability for us to share with them and for them to learn. So it's an educational, concept as well. So,
now, Frankston and the Mornington Peninsula has one of the highest Aboriginal population in Victoria, but also one of the highest transient Aboriginal population. So they're not the local people either.
No. And that makes it really difficult. That has created created very interesting space, because because we are all from somewhere else, and some people are just passing through for 5 minutes, but other, like myself, we're connected elsewhere. We're not connected here, so it's been an interesting space, but our numbers are very high when you look at it.
Yeah. And we know that across the country, average 54% of the population is under the age of 25.
Yeah,
that's very reflective of Mornington Peninsula area.
Yes, very much so.
So when you're looking at the national figures, it's very reflective in the Mornington Peninsula.
Yeah, it is very much so. What
support do our young people in the Frankston Mornington Peninsula actually have or get in terms of cultural?
I say not a lot, but the supports, there are mainstream organisations that are working closely with our young people, so you've got all your your drug and alcohol services. You've got from a cultural perspective, you've got Headspace has got a really good youth group in there that meet regularly, and all the young fellas come together. They've done some beautiful artwork at Jambana. They get together. They they were really supportive in the NAIDOC dinner back in the, I don't know about now, so I can only talk when I was there. So in 2017, like I've developed a half a dozen of the NAIDOC dinners, but in 2017, the young fellas there, because that year it was because of Her We Can, and they came along and they were so supportive in creating the NAIDOC dinner, doing all the background bits and pieces, all the table pieces, really getting in there and organising it. So it was giving the young fellas those skills of organising an event, and they were just fabulous. I'm just trying to think of what other supports you've got. You've got your VACA down here, you've got your Ozchild down here, you've got, all those bits and pieces down here, you've got the LAECG down here, but from a cultural perspective now, Jambana's got they've got a youth group, so I believe they do cultural activities there. Derrim at Willem down at Mordialloc, they've got a youth group. They're starting to do cultural bits and pieces. You've got the Dubden Gathering Place, you've got Willa Moraine. Willa Moraine's got a really strong youth group down there that do tons of cultural activities. So it is within the gathering places, but then there's also the other mainstream supports that support Aboriginal youth as well. And that's all Aboriginal community. It's all our mob.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I don't think people realise, unless you live kind of in Melbourne, how dislocated a lot of people are from culture or from their own Aboriginality. And the gathering places are actually established to help them connect. But if you look at Melbourne, you've just named some all around the eastern and southeastern side. If you go the other way, you've got Mullen, you've got Sunbury, you've got Kirrip up at Melton. Auntie Alma Thorpe. Within a 40-kilometre radius of Melbourne, you've got that many gathering places.
We do.
I don't know if there's any other capital city that's got so many gathering places.
Realistically, we've got 5 because we've got Willem, we've got Jambar, we've got Willem Moraine down at Hastings.
Yeah.
So they're probably the oldest, because I believe they opened, and don't quote me, around 2014, because they're a couple of years older than Jambana. 2017, Jambana launched. 2018, Derrimut Willem launched. And then Casey Gathering Place came on board around the similar time as well. You know, then you've got Dackle, Dandenong Co-op. So Dackle's been around for 40 plus years. They've been here forever. So we've got them.
Their 50th year.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So you know, there's 5 Aboriginal Aboriginal spaces, but then you've also got oh gosh, it's left me at the moment. You know, down in Hastings, you've got the other support.
Bunjawara,
You've got that, and that's been down there for maybe 10 years now. You know, it's morphed and had different owners, but you know, that's also another strong place you've got. You know, so there are places around. You know, Dandenong, we've got a Curry Court in Dandenong now too. So you know, that's that other side. You know, that next to supporting role. So we have got spaces and places. You know, so yeah. But I do agree. We didn't have an echo. Dackle were the only echo in the area, but now with the gathering places coming up and running, they are really doing great guns, and the number of people that are coming in, and you know, the memberships are just, you know, really quite high, which is great. You know, so
the First Peoples as well. The First
Peoples, yep, that's right. And the difference First Peoples have made coming to Frankston has been huge.
Yeah,
it's made such a difference to our mob, and you know, Corinda's doing fantastic. You know, because you hear the talk, and you know, mob talk all the time, as we all know. So that is just a blessing to have that here. To support us, which is great. So yeah.
Question: if I could give you a magic wand and you could do whatever you wanted in Indigenous affairs, where would you start? What would you do?
Oh gosh, where do you start? Because that's a good one. Yeah. I don't know, because my head is going straight to the babies. Because, you know, like we've still got women birthing Aboriginal babies that are still fearful that those babies are going to be taken. And then you look at the numbers of our little one or our kids being, you know, still in out of home care, you know, which is huge. Like, you know, what's going on? We've still got all our, you know, people going through the justice system and overrepresented there, you know. We've got, oh my gosh, where do you start? You got women, you know, 35% more likely to head into family violence, you know, being impacted by family violence. Like we've still got all that ugly statistics that we shouldn't have, you know. So my head's going, do we go our elders, you know, because, you know, like our elders, they're so fragile. You know, we've got limited number of elders in community, but those limited number of elders are fragile.
Yeah.
And we've got to look after them. We've got to really look after them. So do you know, put your magic wand there? Or do you put your magic wand over with the babies or with our young fellas? Like, where do you put your magic wand? So I have to do a sweep across community. I don't know. That's a really tricky one. I need to sit on that. You can't just throw that at me and go, oh, how are we going to do that? Because I don't know.
That's all right. I'll bring you back for part 2 and 3 for that.
Do part 2 and 3. I need to mull that over. But oh, gosh, could you imagine if we all, banded together for the good of community? Because I totally believe that when you work in community, throw your ego out the door because it doesn't work. And just do whatever you need to do for the betterment of community.
Yeah.
Because that's what really matters. And you're talking about young fellas before. We're all on different parts of our journey, and that's the thing that we've got to embrace, because like I always knew I was Aboriginal, but it was never spoken, and we were always told we were something else. So it took me a long time because I had this mucked up view. Like I knew I was Aboriginal, but I was questioned. Hello, I've got red hair and freckles, So I was always questioned about that. I had a real issue about going and getting my Aboriginality. I thought that was absolute BS because why should I have to prove who I am when I know who I am? So that was always an issue. So our young fellas are sort of, they're stepping slowly forward and putting their hand up. And once they put their hand up, that's when we've got to hold on to them. We've got to embrace them, and we've got to walk beside them.
Yeah.
Walk beside them to find out, the next step. So because I know, like even Wayapa, go back to Wayapa for a minute. I was in a early years centre, and we did Wayapa, and I take some bits and pieces in there, and we were talking about the earth, we were talking about, the 14 elements, etc. And this little fella in the background, like he was literally sitting in the background, we started talking, and, I tell a few of my stories, and he started coming forward in the room and in the conversation. So by the end of it, he came up and he gave me the biggest hug, and, like, oh, thanks, Auntie Karen, and he ran off. So we talked about a 4-year-old. And then fast forward, the educator actually said that for the first time he actually identified as being Aboriginal. So they had the conversation with the parents and what have you, and he actually was, but he didn't voice it until that day that I came in. So people will find that immediate connection and actually empowered enough to say, So yeah.
I'm just watching the time. I will bring you back for a second.
Oh no.
But I actually want to just get you to, what would you want our listeners to walk away with from today's conversation?
Life's precious, like just stop and smell the roses, take your time, and also be proud of ourselves, like we've been here 65,000 plus years, let's stand proud and let's, come together and support each other. We don't need people to bang us down because, and we don't need our mob to bang us down, so yeah. Oh my gosh, you've got me on a timeline, so now all of a sudden I can't talk. Oh no, we'll have to come back. So
I will bring you back for a second.
We need to come back for part 2 and part 3. But I just hope, really appreciate all the listeners that you've got, because you're doing a bang up job. It's fantastic, and I think it just gives a platform where we can have open and honest conversations, because it's about telling story. It's about sharing with each other and lifting each other up more than anything else. So I really do appreciate your time. Thanks, AJ.
No, thanks, Karen. Hey guys, I want to say thank you to Karen. Love you, love all your work. And guys, join us for the next podcast. So thanks, Karen. I'll see you guys soon.